Chapter 8. After recess, schoolwork resumed. Mary and Felix did more reading. Then Ida asked that they work on math with help from Tom. Meanwhile, she worked with Charlie on his parsing exercises. That's diagramming sentences, like Mrs. Corbett makes you do. Natasha sat with Herbert and helped him with his math since he was behind. Susie, off by herself, worked on her penmanship. As the day progressed, Ida felt her anxiety fade. She looked over the class. Everything was calm. School, to her surprise, was working. Then why was she so exhausted? Was every day going to be like this? She tried to make a mental calculation as to how much longer the term would be. To her horror, she realized she was too tired to even add properly. Tom raised his hand. Yes, Tom? Miss Bitson, may I come to the desk? Of course. Standing next to her and shielding his hand with his body, Tom showed Ida the face of his pocket watch and whispered, It's past 3. A blushing Ida hastily dismissed the school. How'd it go? Her father asked her in the barn as she milked the cow later that afternoon. It was really hard, Ida confessed. That Herbert Bixler acted up. Did you have to take the switch to him? Thinking of what happened, Ida suddenly found herself smiling. Got him to work without it. Good for you. But the day seemed so long. Pa, I didn't even know the proper time to dismiss everyone. Don't have a watch. Tom had to tell me. I've got something for that. He left the barn and returned in moments with an old wind-up clock. It was ticking loudly. Ida wrinkled her nose. It's awful noisy, she said, not wanting to be unappreciative. Got a drawer in that teacher's desk of yours? Yes. Keep it in there, and tell you what, I'll give you a good fleece to wrap it up in, too. That way, no one will hear. Thank you, Ida said, giving her father an appreciative hug. Much to Ida's surprise, Friday went smoothly. True, Herbert didn't come to school, and Ida did wonder, considering what had happened, if he would ever come back. Still, it was a relief to get to the weekend. She and her father dug holes and set in the posts on their way to extending the south meadow. She found the hard work soothing. On Monday, Herbert was back in school, acting as if nothing had happened, with no explanation about his absence either. Though he was not always attentive and spent a good deal of time simply staring out the windows, he was no longer disruptive. Ida was content with marking him present in the attendance book. She tried her best to follow how Miss Fletcher had organized everything. Each day she had everyone read and memorize from their 15-year-old set of McGuffey's Eclectic Readers. She read aloud, too, a section a day from Charles Dickens' A Tale of Two Cities, from where Miss Fletcher had left off. They reviewed bits of geography, names of states, capitals, and rivers, and went over the facts of United States history, names of presidents in order, famous battles, important heroes. They did penmanship, bookkeeping, and grammar exercises, which meant parsing sentences or doing problems on the blackboard. Math problems were done too, often out loud. Singing selections from the old favorites songbook, plus recitations of memorized literature passages, rounded out the day. On Friday afternoon, the weekly contests were held with Natalie Golleben, as usual, setting down all others in spelling. Tom won in mathematics. Ida added high marks for both in the school ledger. As Ida moved into her second full week of teaching, she caught herself taking moments to relax, gaining a growing awareness that she did not have to be teaching each and every minute of the day. An even bigger discovery that if she just let the students work on their own pace and allowed their questions to become discussions for the class, time went by quickly. More and more she found herself listening to them, thinking about what they said, rather than worrying about what she should say. It amazed her, too, how much she saw from the teacher's desk, things she'd never noticed before, like how Felix screwed up his eyes when concentrating, or the way Natasha chewed her pencil, or how often Mary put her head down and napped, or even how Tom fiddled with his right earlobe whenever he read intently. One afternoon, right after lunch, Tom raised his hand. Yes, Tom? Miss Bitson, I brought something in that everyone might like to listen to. Listen to? The whole class turned around to see what Tom was talking about. Reaching down, Tom brought out a box, placed it on his desk, opened it, and pulled out something Ida had never seen before. It looked like a snarl of wires. "What is that?" she asked. Tom, beaming, held it up. "A crystal radio. I built it myself." "A radio?" Charlie cried. "My dad says we're going to get one soon. Can I go look at it?" he asked Ida. "Tom," Ida said, "why don't you bring it up here?" Proudly, Tom carried the apparatus, that's a vocabulary word, to the teacher's desk. There was a scramble as the other students left their benches to gather around. Ida looked on too. The crystal radio consisted of a cardboard tube that looked like an oatmeal container, around which copper wire had been carefully wound. Wires ran from the tube to a metal clip that held a shiny stone. There was also a hooked wire that looked like a tiny pointer. Attached to this thing was more wire, which was connected to a round disc. "How's it work?" Herbert asked. "Got to get this up first," Tom announced. He attached a long coil of wire to his radio and fed it out the window. "Let's everybody go outside," Ida called. The children scrambled for the door. Once outside, Tom handed Herbert the wire. "This is called an antenna. It pulls in the signal. You need to tie it up to the bell steeple." Herbert took the wire, clenched it in his teeth, then got up onto Tom's shoulders and scrambled onto the roof. In moments, he reached the steeple. Ida and the rest of the class cheered. "Yay!" Herbert fastened the wire to the steeple, then reached in and clanged the bell. "School's out," he called. Everyone laughed. As soon as he got down, they all trooped back inside. Tom began to fiddle with his radio. "You have to be very quiet," he said. "The mountains make reception hard." "What's reception?" Felix asked. "What you hear on a radio." Tom picked up the round disc and held it to his left ear. "An earphone," he explained. With his right hand, he manipulated, that's a vocabulary word, the little pointer, poking it at different spots on the shiny stone, the crystal. In breathless silence, everyone watched Tom as his face, earphone pressed to his ear, grew very intense. Suddenly he grinned. "Got KJQ," he announced. "Salt Lake City." "Where's that?" Felix asked. "Over in Utah," Tom explained. "And what's KJQ mean?" Natasha asked. "It's the radio station's call letters, their name. They're playing music. I think it's called jazz. Does anyone want to hear?" Oops, it's gone. "Where'd it go?" Charlie asked in bewilderment. "Shh," Tom commanded. He fiddled with the little pointer on the stone. "Got Denver. KDL." "What are they doing?" Ida asked. Tom's face showed intense concentration. "Giving livestock prices. Here, listen." He held out the earphone and put it flat against Ida's ear. "Pork bellies are listed at 22 per," she heard in a very scratchy voice, like Mrs. Corbett's, which faded, then grew louder. She handed the listening disc to Herbert, who then passed it on after a few minutes. One by one, the children listened rapidly. At one point, Felix cried, "They're talking about sheep." After they'd each had a turn, Ida asked, "How does it work?" Everyone attended closely, while Tom went into a complicated explanation of the workings of a radio. As he talked, Ida studied his face, deciding that what she liked most was its intensity. Vocabulary word. She loved how excited he was by what he had done. Then they listened to the radio some more, continuing to pass the disc around. As Tom poked different places on the crystal, each student would call out the locations. "Kansas City, Albany, Spokane." "We can go anywhere," Felix cried excitedly. Ida had the idea of pulling down the map of the United States and, using a pointer, indicating where each place they listened to could be found. It was during Charlie's turn that the most exciting moment occurred. "It's a baseball game," he shouted, "from Chicago." Then it was time for afternoon recess. Ida had to almost shoo the younger children out. Only she and Tom remained in the room. "I'm glad you brought that in," she told him, as he packed the crystal radio away. "How'd you learn to make it?" Tom gave a shy shrug. "Popular Mechanics. I wrote away for the parts." Ida felt a swell of pride for him. Suddenly the door burst open and a red-faced Mary Cole appeared. Ida, Miss Benson, she corrected herself. There's a lady out there I ain't never seen before. Says she's from the county education office. Says she needs to meet with our teacher. And that's the end of chapter 8.